Commander Vexitar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the viewing screen. His scaled skin rippled with satisfaction as he studied the primitive world below. Earth, the locals called it, a backwater planet on the edge of nowhere, filled with creatures who barely understood the basics of space travel. "Status report," Vexitar commanded, his 3 eyes focusing on his tactical officer. "All 30 ships report ready, Commander. The planet shows no significant defensive capabilities. We detected some orbital satellites and a small station circling their moon, but nothing that poses a threat to our fleet." Vexitar clicked his mandibles together in amusement. The Kratesh Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the last century. This would be conquest number 48, and probably the easiest. His scouts had done their work well. These humans had only achieved basic spaceflight within the last 100 years. They still used chemical rockets for the star's sake. They fought wars among themselves with explosive projectiles and crude nuclear weapons. "Begin the invasion protocol," Vexitar ordered. "Send the standard surrender demand. Make it clear that resistance is futile." Halfway across the galaxy, in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Zeloth reviewed the morning reports with bored efficiency. His long fingers scrolled through dozens of notifications, most of them routine bureaucratic matters. Trade disputes, border negotiations, scientific discoveries from various member worlds. One report caught his attention briefly. The Kratesh Empire had filed an official notice of conquest for a planet called Earth in Sector 447b. Zeloth pulled up the file and scanned it quickly. Class 7 civilization. Single planet. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology, level, primitive. No interstellar capability. He marked it as acknowledged and moved on. The Council maintained records of such things, but they rarely intervened in the affairs of pre-spacefaring species. It was unfortunate for the humans, but the galaxy was a harsh place. Perhaps some of them would be integrated into the Empire as workers or servants. That was usually how these things went. Zeloth had more important matters to consider. The trade summit with the Velkaran Federation was approaching, and there were still issues to resolve about shipping lanes and tariffs. On Earth, in a military bunker buried deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, Captain Jake Morrison stared at his screen with growing concern. The anomalies had started appearing 3 hours ago. Massive energy signatures entering the solar system, moving with purpose toward Earth. Whatever they weren't natural phenomena. "General Brennan, you need to see this," Jake called across the command center. General Lisa Brennan walked over quickly, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She had been expecting this day for 3 years, ever since they had intercepted those strange radio signals from deep space. The government had kept it quiet, but they had been preparing, building weapons, training soldiers, establishing bases on the Moon and Mars that officially didn't exist. "Is this it?" Lisa asked quietly. "Yes, ma'am. 30 large objects, definitely artificial. They'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 hours. Lisa took a deep breath and picked up the red phone that connected directly to the president. "Mr. President, this is General Brennan. We have confirmed contact. I'm initiating Protocol Guardian." Around the world, alarms began to sound in secret military installations. Soldiers who had trained for 3 years for a war that might never come suddenly found themselves mobilized. Fighter pilots rushed to experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. Scientists activated weapon systems that were still considered theoretical by most of the scientific community. In New York City, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez kissed her daughter goodbye and told her she would be back soon, even though she wasn't sure if that was true. In Beijing, Colonel Wei Chen ordered his troops to their positions and said a silent prayer. In Moscow, Captain Dmitry Volkov loaded live ammunition into his fighter for the first time in his career and felt his hands shake slightly. The aliens had chosen to invade on a Tuesday morning. Lisa found that detail oddly amusing as she watched the enemy fleet approach on her screens. They had picked Earth, thinking it would be easy. They had studied humanity's public technology and decided these primitive creatures would surrender without a fight. They had made a terrible mistake. The mistake became apparent when the Kratesh fleet achieved orbit and prepared to deploy their ground forces. Jake Morrison, now coordinating Earth's lunar base, gave a single command: fire. The moon's surface erupted with light as railguns and missile batteries that the aliens had never detected opened fire. The weapons had been disguised as mining equipment and scientific stations. The Kratesh had seen what they expected to see, not what was actually there. Commander Vextar's ship shook violently as the first projectile struck his shields. Alarms screamed across his bridge. "Report!" he shouted. "Weapons fire from their moon, Commander. Multiple launch sites. Shields holding. But we have 3 ships destroyed and 5 damaged." "Impossible. Our scouts said they had no significant weapons." Another volley struck the fleet. This time, kinetic projectiles traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The humans had been building magnetic accelerators in secret for 3 years, using technology they had developed for civilian purposes and weaponized with ruthless efficiency. "Evasive maneuvers! Return fire!" Vextar ordered, his confidence shaken. On Earth, Lisa Brennan allowed herself a small smile. The first blood had been drawn. The aliens would be confused now, wondering what else humanity had hidden from them. That confusion would be their second mistake. "Launch the fighters," she commanded. "Let's show them what we can do." From hidden hangars on Earth, the moon and orbital stations disguised as space debris, hundreds of human fighters launched into space. They were cobbled together from experimental technology, reverse-engineered alien equipment from a probe that had crashed in Canada 2 years ago, and pure human stubbornness. They weren't as advanced as the Kratesh ships, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to be good enough. Lieutenant Ryan Parker gripped his controls as his fighter screamed into space. He had trained for this moment, dreamed of it, dreaded it. Now it was here. Through his canopy, he could see the alien ships, dark and menacing against the stars. They were bigger than his fighter, more powerful, more advanced. But Ryan had something they didn't have. He had a planet full of people depending on him. He had a family to protect. And he had the knowledge that if he failed here, if humanity failed here, there would be no second chance. "All fighters, this is Morrison," Jake's voice crackled over the radio. "Remember your training. Stay unpredictable. Watch each other's backs. And make every shot count." "Good luck." Ryan checked his weapons one final time and accelerated toward the enemy. Behind him, hundreds of other pilots did the same. The battle for Earth had begun. And in a chamber halfway across the galaxy, Ambassador Zieloth continued his paperwork, completely unaware that everything he thought he knew about Class 7 civilizations was about to change forever. The space around Earth had turned into chaos. Ryan Parker twisted his fighter through a storm of plasma fire, his heart hammering in his chest. The alien weapons left bright purple trails through the darkness, and each one that missed him by inches made him grateful for every hour he had spent in the simulator. "3 on your 6, Parker!" his wingman shouted over the radio. Ryan didn't think. He just reacted. He killed his forward thrust and fired his maneuvering jets, spinning his fighter in a direction that made no sense according to traditional space combat doctrine. The Kratesh pilots, trained in standard fleet tactics, didn't expect it. Their plasma shots sailed past him, and Ryan found himself behind them instead. He squeezed the trigger, his weapons, crude copies of alien plasma cannons powered by a nuclear reactor that would make any safety inspector scream, spat fire. One alien fighter exploded, then another. The third managed to evade and accelerate away. "That's the problem with you aliens," Ryan muttered to himself. "You fight by the book. We're still writing ours." Commander Vextar watched his tactical display with growing horror. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They used suicide drones that the Kratesh point defense systems couldn't target fast enough. They hid among the debris field they had created by destroying orbital satellites and waited to ambush his ships. They even rammed their fighters into his larger vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. "What kind of species does this?" his tactical officer whispered, watching another human pilot deliberately crash into a Kratesh cruiser's engine array. "A desperate one," Vextar replied. But even as he said it, he wondered if that was true. The human pilots he had heard over intercepted communications didn't sound desperate. They sounded angry, determined. Some of them were even joking with each other between attacks. "Commander, they're launching some kind of projectile from the planet's surface. It's not following a standard trajectory." Vexatar focused on the new threat. Whatever the humans had launched was massive and moving fast, too fast for conventional rockets. "Intercept it," his weapons officer tried. Plasma cannons fired, missiles launched, but the projectile kept coming. It wasn't until too late that Vextar realized what it was. Not a weapon. A ship. A crude, ugly ship built from what looked like steel girders and covered in improvised armor. The ship slammed into one of his cruisers at tremendous speed. The impact broke the cruiser in half. Then, the ship's cargo bay opened and released thousands of small objects. They spread like seeds in the wind, each one seeking a Kratesh vessel. "They're mines!" someone shouted. "Magnetic mines!" The mines latched onto his ships and began cutting through hulls with plasma torches. It was simple, brutal, and effective. 3 more ships went dark as the mines destroyed critical systems. On Earth, General Lisa Brennan coordinated the battle from her command center. Every screen showed a different part of the fight. Some showed victories, many showed losses. Human fighters were being shot down, pilots were dying, but they were also learning, adapting, and most importantly, they were holding the line. "General, we're getting reports from the surface. The aliens are attempting landings in North America, Europe, and Asia." Lisa had expected this. The aliens would try to establish ground bases to secure their invasion. "Activate ground defense protocols. And get me Colonel Rodriguez." Amy Rodriguez was already in position when the first alien dropships descended over Texas. She crouched in a specially prepared bunker outside Houston, watching through her scope as the massive ships lowered toward the ground. They were impressive, built like flying fortresses, and they carried hundreds of troops each. The aliens probably expected either a helpless civilian population or maybe some scattered military resistance. What they got was 3 years of preparation and a whole lot of human spite. "Wait for it," Amy whispered to her team. "Let them land. Let them think it's safe." The dropships touched down in an open area outside the city. Their doors opened, and Kratesh soldiers poured out, weapons ready. They were tall, covered in scales, and looked like they could tear a human apart with their bare claws. The first wave of soldiers moved forward confidently. They had conquered dozens of worlds. This would be no different. Then the ground exploded beneath them. Amy's team had spent weeks preparing the landing zone. Every inch of it was mined, trapped, and rigged to turn into a killing field at the touch of a button. The aliens had scanned from orbit, of course, but humans had learned to hide their surprises deep underground, where scanners couldn't reach. "Now!" Amy shouted. "Hit them with everything!" Artillery hidden in nearby buildings opened fire. Missiles launched from concealed positions. Snipers began picking off alien officers. And Amy's team, equipped with experimental energy weapons that probably violated several safety regulations, poured fire into the confused alien ranks. The Kratesh were tough and well-trained, but they had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that turned their own environment into a weapon. An enemy that didn't fight fair because fair fighting was for people who had better options. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In Europe, human forces collapsed bridges and buildings onto alien positions. In Asia, soldiers lured the invaders into dense urban areas where the aliens' superior weapons were neutralized by close-quarters combat. In South America, resistance fighters disappeared into the jungle and turned it into a nightmare for any Kratesh soldier foolish enough to follow. The Galactic Council's junior analyst, Mira Shen, sat at her workstation and frowned at her display. She had noticed unusual quantum disruptions coming from Sector 447B. The patterns were consistent with heavy weapons fire and ship explosions. That was odd. The Kratesh invasion of Earth should have been concluded by now. Primitive worlds didn't have the capability to resist a full battle fleet. She ran the data again, checking for errors. The results were the same. Something was happening in that system, something unexpected. "Ambassador Zeloth?" she called tentatively to her superior. "I think there might be a situation developing in Sector 447B. Zeloth looked up from his work with irritation. "The Earth invasion? That should be routine." "That's what I thought. But the quantum signatures suggest significant combat. Multiple ship losses. The patterns are similar to the Battle of Koresh, which lasted 3 weeks. That's impossible. The humans are Class 7. They don't have the technology for prolonged space combat." But Zeloth accessed the data himself, and his expression changed. "Send an observer probe. Full sensor suite. I want real-time data." Back in Earth's orbit, Jake Morrison coordinated a desperate maneuver. His lunar base was running low on ammunition, his fighters were down to 30% strength, and the aliens were finally organizing a coordinated response. But the humans had bought time. Time for more weapons to launch from Earth. Time for reinforcements to scramble from hidden bases on Mars. Time for one very desperate plan. "Ben, are you in position?" Jake asked over his secure channel. Major Ben Crawford floated in space inside a combat suit, clinging to a piece of debris near one of the larger Kratesh battlecruisers. His team of 20 Special Operations soldiers waited with him, invisible against the wreckage of destroyed ships. "In position," Ben confirmed quietly. "This is insane, Morrison, you know that, right?" "Completely insane," Jake agreed. "That's why it might work. The aliens haven't seen us do anything insane yet today." Ben smiled inside his helmet. "Fair point. Beginning insertion now." His team used small maneuvering jets to drift closer to the alien warship. They moved slowly, carefully, hidden among the debris and censored dead thanks to specialized coating on their suits. The ship's hull loomed above them, covered in strange symbols and dotted with weapon ports. They attached magnetic clamps to the hull and began cutting their way inside with plasma torches. It took 15 minutes of nerve-wracking work, but eventually they breached the outer hull and slipped into the ship's maintenance corridor. "We're in," Ben reported. "Moving to engineering." Inside the alien ship, the humans moved like ghosts. They had studied the layout from captured data files, and they knew exactly where to go. The Kratesh crew never expected borders, especially not from a species they considered primitive. Ben's team moved fast, leaving magnetic charges on critical systems as they went. They encountered 3 patrols and eliminated them quietly. Finally, they reached the engineering section and planted their primary explosive on the main power core. "Charges set," 30 seconds to extraction point. They ran. Behind them, the charges began their countdown. Ben's team reached the hull breach just as alarms started screaming throughout the ship. They jumped into space and activated their jets, accelerating away as fast as their suits would carry them. The battlecruiser exploded in a beautiful, terrible flower of light and debris. Commander Vexitar watched it happen from his flagship, and for the first time since beginning this invasion, he felt something he had never felt in combat before. Fear. The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the probe's transmission began. Hundreds of delegates from across known space watched the main viewing screen, expecting to see a standard conquest report. What they saw instead made many of them stand in shock. The probe had arrived in the Sol system and immediately begun recording everything. Now that data played before the Council in real time. Space around the planet Earth looked like a war zone from ancient history. Debris fields stretched for thousands of kilometers. Ships burned and died. And somehow, impossibly, the primitive human forces were not only fighting back, but winning. "Replay that section," High Chancellor Tormach commanded, his voice tight. The technician obeyed. The screen showed a small human fighter, no bigger than a shuttle, facing off against 3 Kratesh interceptors. The logical outcome was obvious. The human should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, the human pilot performed a maneuver that made half the military experts in the chamber gasp. The fighter killed its momentum, spun in place, and fired at point-blank range, destroying 2 attackers before the third could react. Then it accelerated in a direction no sane pilot would choose, using debris as cover. "That's not possible," Admiral Sector of the Velkaran Federation muttered. "Those G-forces should have killed the pilot." Ambassador Zeloth felt his confidence in everything he knew about the galaxy beginning to crack. Class 7 civilizations didn't do this. They couldn't do this. Yet here was proof that they could and were, and the Kratesh were paying the price for underestimating them. "Show us the ground combat," Tormach ordered. The probe's sensors shifted focus to the planet's surface. Multiple battles raged across the continents. The Council watched as Kratesh dropped troops, veterans of dozens of campaigns, found themselves trapped in urban environments where every building could hide an ambush. They watched human soldiers using tactics that were considered primitive but devastatingly effective. One particular engagement drew attention. A human commander, a female with dark hair tied back in a practical style, coordinated an ambush that destroyed an entire Kratesh company. She used their own smoke for cover, their own confusion against them, and when the aliens tried to retreat, they found the escape routes had been mined hours earlier. "They planned this," someone in the chamber whispered. "They knew where the aliens would land and prepared the battlefield." "But how?" another delegate asked. "They shouldn't have known the invasion was coming." Zeloth pulled up Earth's file again and read it more carefully this time. The humans had been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century. They had been launching probes to other planets in their system. They had been listening for signals from the stars. Of course, they had been preparing. Any species capable of splitting the atom was capable of recognizing a threat when it appeared. The Council had dismissed Earth because the humans hadn't achieved faster-than-light travel. That single criterion had marked them as unimportant. It was a mistake that Zeloth was beginning to realize could reshape the entire galactic order. Commander Vextar's day continued to get worse. His fleet had started with 30 ships. He was now down to 19 functional vessels. Ground operations that should have taken hours were entering their second day with no progress. And worst of all, the humans had somehow intercepted and decoded his communications. He knew this because they had started responding to his orders before his own ships could. When he commanded his Eastern fleet to attack the human lunar base, The humans had moved their defenses into position 30 minutes before his ships arrived. When he ordered a retreat from a ground position in Asia, the humans were already waiting at the fallback point. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "Unknown, Commander. Our encryption is military grade, approved by the Empire. It should be unbreakable by a Class 7 civilization." In a bunker deep below the Swiss Alps, Dr. Sophie Chen smiled at her computer screen. The alien encryption had been tough, she would give them that. It had taken her and her team 48 hours of continuous work to crack it, but humans had been breaking codes and inventing new ones for thousands of years. They had built their entire information age on mathematics and cryptography. The aliens had made their encryption strong but followed predictable patterns. Humans specialized in finding patterns. "General Brennan," Sophie spoke into her headset, "I have their entire tactical database, ship positions, supply routes, command protocols, weapon specifications, and the location of their supply depot." Lisa Brennan sat forward in her chair. "Supply depot?" "Yes, ma'am. It's at the edge of our solar system near the orbit of Neptune. They've been using it to resupply and repair their ships. If we could take it out, they would be stranded here with no reinforcements and limited ammunition." Lisa felt a predatory smile cross her face. "Sophie, you beautiful genius. Get me Morrison. We're going on the offensive." Major Ben Crawford and his special operations team had become something of a legend in the fleet. After boarding and destroying their first enemy warship, they had done it 3 more times. The aliens were now terrified of debris fields and scanned them constantly for hidden humans. It didn't help. Ben's team had gotten very good at staying hidden and moving fast. "Sir, I have to ask," one of his soldiers said as they prepared for their 5th boarding action. "Are we crazy?" "Absolutely," Ben replied cheerfully. "But we're also winning, so let's not stop now." They drifted through space toward their target, another Kratesh cruiser. This one was damaged from the earlier fighting, its shields weakened. It was perfect for their purposes. The Galactic Council had been in session for 6 hours straight, watching the battle unfold. More probes had been sent, and now they had multiple angles on the conflict. What had started as curiosity had become something else. Concern, fascination, fear. "This changes everything," High Chancellor Tormach said quietly. "If humans can resist the Kratesh like this, what else are they capable of?" "They're still losing ships," Admiral Sector pointed out. "Their casualties are significantly higher than the Kratesh. In a prolonged conflict, they would eventually be defeated." "Would they?" Zeloth asked. The question surprised him as much as everyone else. "Look at their behavior. They're not fighting like a species facing extinction. They're fighting like a species that's angry someone tried to threaten their home. There's a difference." The screen showed another human fighter pilot ramming her damaged craft into a Kratesh dropship, destroying both. The pilot had ejected at the last second and was floating in space waiting for rescue. Her radio transmission was picked up by the probe. "Tower, this is Lieutenant Hannah Price. Target destroyed. Requesting pickup. And someone tell my husband I'm fine before he sees this on the news." The council chamber erupted in discussion. The pilot had just sacrificed her fighter, nearly died, and her first thought was about her family worrying. What kind of species thought like that in the middle of a battle? Mira Shen, who had been watching everything with growing interest, pulled up more data on human history. What she found made her blood run cold. These creatures had spent most of their recorded history fighting each other. Thousands of wars, millions of deaths. They had invented increasingly terrible weapons and used them on their own kind. Nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons. And then somehow they had pulled back from the brink. They had started cooperating. They had begun to reach for the stars. But they hadn't forgotten how to fight. They had just been waiting for a reason to direct all that violent creativity outward instead of inward. "Hi, Chancellor," Mira Shen spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "I think we need to look at Earth's history. These humans, they're not just fighting to survive. They've been preparing for something like this their entire existence as a species. They evolved on a death world." "Explain," Tormac commanded. Mirashin displayed Earth's environmental data. Their planet has extreme weather variations, massive storms, temperature swings that would kill most species, tectonic activity that causes devastating earthquakes. They evolved alongside predators that could kill them easily. Disease, famine, natural disasters, they survived all of it. And they did it without any natural weapons. No claws, no armor, no venom, just intelligence, cooperation, and an apparently infinite capacity to adapt. The chamber went quiet as the implications sank in. "They're persistence hunters," Mira Shen continued. "There are records in their history of humans tracking prey for days, sometimes weeks, until the prey died from exhaustion. They don't give up. It's not in their nature." On the screen, the battle continued. A human ship, barely held together and leaking atmosphere, continued fighting even as its crew evacuated. The captain stayed behind, using the ship as a guided missile to take out 2 Kratesh frigates before the reactor finally exploded. Commander Vextar received the message from the Kratesh homeworld with trembling hands. They were sending reinforcements, but they wouldn't arrive for another week. Until then, he was on his own against an enemy that seemed to get stronger with every hour that passed. He looked at his tactical display and made a decision. "Prepare to retreat to the supply depot. We'll regroup there and wait for reinforcements." It was the smart military move. His tactical officers agreed. Even his most aggressive commanders thought it was wise. None of them knew that the humans already knew where the depot was. None of them knew that Captain Jake Morrison was already preparing a fleet to attack it. And none of them understood that the humans had learned an important lesson from this battle. Never let the enemy rest. Never give them time to recover. Attack, adapt, and keep attacking until the threat is eliminated. Ambassador Zeloth watched the Kratesh fleet begin its retreat and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. He felt afraid of the future, because somewhere in the back of his mind, a question had formed that he couldn't shake. If humans could do this while still trapped on one planet, what would they be capable of if they ever achieved true space-faring technology? The galaxy might not be ready for the answer. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the hangar bay of the makeshift flagship, looking at the fleet that would carry humanity's counterstrike. It was not an impressive sight by galactic standards. Civilian cargo haulers retrofitted with weapons, mining ships equipped with military-grade sensors, scientific vessels carrying enough explosives to level a city. Even a few luxury yachts that had been converted into fast attack craft. The Earth Defense Force had scraped together every ship that could fly and every weapon they could mount. It was desperate and chaotic and completely human. "Attention all ships," Jake broadcast across the fleet channel. "In 1 hour, we begin our assault on the enemy supply depot. This is not a defensive action. We are taking the fight to them. We are showing them that Earth is not a victim to be conquered. We are a threat to be feared. Check your systems, say your prayers if you have them, and get ready to make history." Lisa Brennan watched from Earth as the fleet prepared to depart. She had wanted to go with them, but someone needed to coordinate planetary defense. The aliens still had ground forces scattered across 3 continents, and while they were losing, they were far from defeated. "General, we have movement in the Amazon basin. The Kratesh are trying to establish a base there. Send Colonel Martinez with his jungle warfare unit. If the aliens want to hide in the forest, let's teach them why humans invented the word ambush." Colonel Greg Martinez had been born in the rainforests of Colombia and had spent 20 years learning every trick of jungle combat. When his orders came through, he smiled. The aliens thought the jungle would give them cover and safety. They were about to learn that humans had been apex predators in these environments for thousands of years. His team moved through the dense vegetation like ghosts. They knew every sound, every smell, every sign of disturbance. The Kratesh, for all their advanced technology, crashed through the undergrowth like elephants. They used their scanners to search for threats, never realizing that humans didn't need scanners. They had instinct and experience. "Contact in 300 meters, Martinez whispered to his team. "Set the trap." The Kratesh patrol walked straight into it. Tripwires triggered falling logs. Hidden pits swallowed soldiers into sharpened stakes. Snipers picked off survivors from trees they had climbed hours ago. And when the aliens tried to call for help, they found their communications jammed by equipment that humans had built from civilian radio parts. "Welcome to Earth," Martinez said quietly as the last alien fell. "Hope you enjoyed your visit." In space, Jake's fleet approached the supply depot with caution. The facility was massive, built to service an entire battle fleet. It hung in the darkness near Neptune, probably thinking it was safe this far from Earth. The Kratesh had made another mistake. "All ships, this is Morrison. Remember the plan. We hit fast and hard. The cargo haulers go for the fuel storage. Mining ships target their repair docks. Science vessels aim for the command center. And everyone stays away from the ammunition depot until I give the signal. Questions?" "Yeah, Captain," someone called over the radio. "What's our extraction plan?" "We blow up their depot, damage their fleet, and get home alive. That's the plan." "That's not much of an extraction plan." "I know. That's why we need to make the first part work really well." The fleet accelerated to attack speed. The supply depot's sensors finally registered them, and alarms began screaming across the facility. Kratesh ships that had been docked for repairs scrambled to launch. Defense platforms activated and began tracking targets. It didn't matter. The humans were already too close. The first cargo hauler, named Lucky Star, piloted by a cargo captain named Danny Wright, who had spent 30 years hauling goods between Earth and Mars, fired every weapon it had at the fuel storage tanks. The primitive missiles and kinetic rounds tore through the depot's shields, and Lucky Star followed them in, ramming straight into the storage complex. Danny had ejected 3 seconds before impact. He tumbled through space, watching as his ship, his home for 3 decades, exploded in a ball of fire that consumed half the depot's fuel supply. "Lucky Star is down, but the target is destroyed," Danny reported calmly. "Someone want to pick me up? It's cold out here." The mining ship Prospector, captained by Kate Sullivan, who had found 3 asteroid fortunes in her career, used its industrial cutting lasers to slice through the repair docks. The lasers had been designed to cut through solid rock in the asteroid belt. Against the depot's structures, they went through like butter. "Repair facilities are gone," Kate reported. "Any ship that's damaged is staying damaged." Commander Vexitar received the reports with growing horror. The humans had found his supply depot. They were destroying it. And worst of all, several of his ships were still docked there, unable to launch in time. "All ships, defend the depot," he commanded. But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. The humans had sacrificed their element of surprise, their safety, even their lives, all for this one strike. It was working. The science vessel Discovery, crewed by researchers who had been studying Jupiter's moons when the war started, fired their experimental weapons at the depot's command center. The weapons were prototypes, unstable, and had a 30% chance of exploding in the launch tubes. All of them fired successfully. The command center disappeared in a series of explosions. "This is for my son," the captain of Discovery whispered. His son had been a pilot, shot down in the first day of fighting. You picked the wrong planet to invade. The Galactic Council's probes captured everything. The delegates watched as the human fleet tore through the Kratesh supply depot with a combination of courage, desperation, and tactical brilliance. They watched as human ships sacrificed themselves to ensure their weapons hit the target. They watched as civilians turned warriors destroyed military installations that should have been impossible for them to reach. "They're magnificent," Mira Shen whispered. She immediately regretted saying it out loud, but many delegates were nodding in agreement. High Chancellor Tormac sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The implications were staggering. Earth had not even been considered for council membership. They were too primitive, too isolated, too insignificant. Now, in the span of a week, they had fought off an invasion fleet and launched a successful counterstrike. "We need to send a delegation," Tormac decided. "If the humans win this war, and it looks like they might, we need to establish formal contact immediately." Ambassador Zeloth felt a mixture of shame and respect. He had dismissed Earth without a second thought. He had classified them as unimportant. Now he was watching them rewrite the rules of galactic warfare. Jake Morrison's ship, the heavily modified cruiser Defiant, led the final phase of the attack. His target was the ammunition depot, the most dangerous objective. If they could destroy it, the Kratesh fleet would be crippled. But one wrong hit, and the entire human fleet would be caught in the explosion. "All ships, pull back to minimum safe distance," Jake ordered. "I'm going in alone." "Negative, Morrison," came Lisa Brennan's voice from Earth. "That's suicide." "Yes, ma'am, it probably is. But if I miss this shot, I'd rather not take everyone else with me." Defiant going in. Jake pushed his ship to maximum speed, dodging defensive fire from the remaining depot weapons. His hands were steady on the controls, his mind clear. He had one shot at this. The ammunition depot was heavily shielded, but there was a weak point where the loading mechanisms connected to the main storage. Sophie Chen's team had identified it from intercepted Kratesh files. "Targeting systems locked. Firing." The missile launched from Defiant. It was a modified nuclear warhead, one of the last in Earth's arsenal. The humans had agreed years ago to eliminate such weapons. Now they were using one to save their planet. The missile struck the weak point perfectly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ammunition depot exploded with the force of a small star, going nova. The shockwave raced outward, consuming Kratesh ships that had been too slow to evacuate. Jake's ship was caught at the edge of the blast. Defiant shook violently. Systems failing, hull breaching, but it held together. Barely. "Morrison, report!" Lisa's voice crackled over the damaged radio. "Still alive, General. The depot is gone. Mission accomplished." Jake laughed, slightly hysterical from adrenaline and oxygen deprivation. "I can't believe that worked." The human fleet regrouped and began the long journey back to Earth. They had lost 12 ships and over 300 crew members, but they had achieved their objective. The Kratesh fleet was now stranded in the Sol system with limited supplies, no repair facilities, and no hope of reinforcement arriving in time to matter. Commander Vextar stared at the ruins of his supply depot and knew that he had lost. His fleet was crippled. His ground forces were being systematically hunted down by human soldiers who seemed to know the terrain better than his own scanners. His communications were compromised, and worst of all, he had just received word that the humans were broadcasting his defeat across every frequency they could access. The broadcast was simple, but devastating. Captain Greg Martinez, standing in the jungle surrounded by his victorious soldiers, spoke directly to the galaxy. This is Colonel Greg Martinez of the United Earth Defense Force, broadcasting from the Amazon rainforest. The Kratash Empire invaded our world thinking we were weak. They were wrong. We have defeated their fleet. We have destroyed their supply lines. We have driven them from our lands. And we send this message to anyone else who might think Earth is easy prey. We are humanity. We do not surrender, we do not submit, and we will defend our home with everything we have. Come in peace, and we will be your friends. Come with weapons, and we will show you what we are truly capable of. The choice is yours. The message echoed across the galaxy. The Galactic Council heard it. The Kratash Empire heard it. And every spacefaring civilization in known space heard it. Earth had announced itself to the galaxy. Not as a victim, not as a primitive world begging for mercy, but as a power that had earned respect through blood and fire. Ambassador Zeloth began composing a message to the Council. Earth needed to be granted a seat at the table. Not eventually. Not after years of observation and evaluation. Now. Because the alternative was having a dangerous wild card in the galaxy, and that served no one's interests. The age of humanity had begun, whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. General Lisa Brennan stood in front of the quantum communication array, straightening her uniform one final time. Behind her stood her officers, the men and women who had led Earth through its first interstellar war. Jake Morrison, still recovering from injuries sustained during the supply depot assault. Amy Rodriguez, who had become a legend for her defensive tactics. Ben Crawford, whose boarding actions had terrified the enemy. Greg Martinez, Kate Sullivan, and dozens more. They were tired. They were wounded. But they stood tall and proud because they had done the impossible. The quantum link activated, and suddenly Lisa was looking at the Galactic Council chamber. Hundreds of alien faces stared back at her from the viewing screen, some curious, some afraid, some hostile. She had been briefed on what to expect, but seeing it in person was different. Members of the Galactic Council, Lisa began, her voice steady and clear. I am General Lisa Brennan of the United Earth Defense Force. 2 weeks ago, the Kratash Empire invaded our world without warning or provocation. They assumed we would be easy prey. They were mistaken. We have defeated their invasion force and secured our system. We now seek formal diplomatic relations with the galactic community. High Chancellor Tormac studied the human general. She was small by galactic standards, but there was steel in her eyes. Behind her stood warriors who had achieved the impossible. This was not a species that would beg for acceptance. They were demanding it as equals. General Brennan, Tormac spoke carefully. The Galactic Council acknowledges your victory. However, Earth is still classified as a Class 7 civilization. You lack faster-than-light travel, advanced manufacturing, and many other technologies considered essential for Council membership. With respect, Chancellor, we also lack a tendency to invade worlds without checking if they can fight back. Lisa's response was polite but firm. We may not have your technology yet, but we have proven we can defend ourselves and adapt quickly. The Kratash learned that lesson the hard way. We would prefer that the rest of the galaxy learn it through diplomacy rather than conflict. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The human was right, and they all knew it. Earth had changed the calculations. A species didn't need advanced technology to be dangerous. They just needed intelligence, determination, and the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. Ambassador Zeloth rose from his seat. General Brennan, I speak for many here when I say that Earth has earned our attention. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that our classifications did not account for. I personally recommend that Earth be granted provisional council membership, with full membership pending technological advancement. We accept your recommendation, Ambassador. Lisa allowed herself a small smile. We look forward to peaceful cooperation with all council members. We also have a message for the council regarding the Kratesh Empire. The screen split, and Commander Vextar appeared on one side. The alien commander looked defeated, his scales dull and his eyes downcast. He was transmitting from his flagship, which was currently surrounded by human vessels in Earth orbit. "I am Commander Vextar of the Kratesh Empire," he said quietly. "I hereby formally surrender to the forces of Earth. My remaining ships and personnel are at your mercy." The council chamber erupted in discussion. A formal surrender to a Class 7 civilization was unprecedented. It would humiliate the Kratesh Empire and send shockwaves through galactic politics. Lisa continued, "We are not interested in revenge or occupation. We want peace. Commander Vextar and his surviving soldiers will be returned to the Kratesh Empire unharmed. We ask only that the Empire acknowledge our sovereignty and agree to a non-aggression treaty. If they agree, we will consider this matter closed." The generosity surprised many council members. The humans had won decisively. By galactic law, they could have demanded reparations, territory, or technology. Instead, they were offering peace. "Why?" Narration asked, unable to contain her curiosity. "You defeated them completely. You could demand so much more." "Because war is expensive, and we have better things to do than chase revenge," Lisa replied simply. "We want to explore the stars, meet new civilizations, and maybe avoid getting invaded again. Starting a blood feud with the Kratesh Empire doesn't help us achieve any of those goals." In a research facility in Geneva, Dr. Alex Turner prepared his presentation for the Council's Scientific Assembly. He had been asked to explain how humanity had managed to resist the invasion. His findings would change how the galaxy viewed Earth forever. "Distinguished members," Alex began, "humanity evolved on what we now understand is classified as a Class 12 death world. Our planet experiences temperature variations that would kill most galactic species. We have weather phenomena capable of destroying cities, tectonic activity that reshapes continents, and, until very recently, we shared our world with predators that considered us prey." He displayed images of Earth's environment: hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. The assembled scientists watched in horror. To survive this environment, humanity developed several unique traits. First, we are persistence hunters. We can track prey for days or weeks, outlasting faster and stronger creatures through sheer endurance. Second, we have exceptional adaptation capabilities. When faced with a new threat, we analyze it, develop counters, and implement them rapidly. Third, we have an unusual psychological resistance to fear and despair. Where other species might surrender when facing overwhelming odds, humans tend to become more determined. This explains their combat behavior, one scientist noted. They don't fight like a species facing extinction. They fight like predators defending territory. "Exactly," Alex confirmed. "Additionally, humans have spent most of our history in conflict with each other. We have developed incredibly sophisticated tactics for warfare, deception, and strategy. When the Kratesh invaded, they weren't just fighting one nation or culture. They were fighting against 6,000 years of accumulated military knowledge from hundreds of different human civilizations." The presentation continued, detailing human biology, psychology, and social structures. By the end, the scientific assembly had a new understanding of why Earth had been so successful. The humans weren't just lucky. They were evolutionarily designed for exactly the kind of conflict the Kratesh had brought to them. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Hannah Price stood in a hospital room, holding her newborn daughter. She had been shot down 3 times during the war, ejected twice, and spent 6 hours floating in space, waiting for rescue after the 2nd time. But she had survived, and now she looked down at her baby girl with tears in her eyes. "Welcome to the universe, little one," Hannah whispered. "It's dangerous out there, full of aliens, some friendly and some not. But don't worry. Your mom and a whole lot of brave people made sure it's safe for you to grow up. And by the time you're old enough to fly, maybe we'll have explored half the galaxy." Her husband, a ground forces lieutenant named Peter Price, put his arm around her shoulders. "Think she'll be a pilot like her mom? If she's smart, she'll be a diplomat. We're going to need a lot of those in the coming years." Commander Vextar stood before the HFY Council, giving his testimony. He had been dreading this moment, but he owed it to the soldiers he had lost to tell the truth. "They fight like every battle is their last," Vextar explained. "They mourn their dead, but never stop advancing. They turn our weapons against us, adapt to our tactics within hours, and show no fear of death. Their pilots will ram their ships into ours if they run out of ammunition. Their soldiers will hold positions that should be impossible to defend. And they do it all while maintaining communication networks that should not work with their primitive technology." "Are they naturally aggressive?" one council member asked. "No. That's what makes them truly dangerous. They're capable of great aggression when threatened, but also capable of mercy. They returned our survivors. They offered peace when they could have demanded our submission. They're not monsters. They're simply very, very good at war when they need to be, and very rational when the war is over." The HFY Council sat in silence, processing this information. One of their fleets, led by an experienced commander, had been defeated by a species that shouldn't have been able to resist. The implications for the Empire's reputation were devastating. "We accept Earth's terms," the High Council leader finally said. "Non-aggression treaty, acknowledgement of sovereignty, and we will pay reparations for the damage we caused. The Empire made a grave error in judgment. We will not repeat it." 6 months later, Lieutenant Kate Sullivan led the first official human diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council station. Her ship, named Hope by popular vote, docked at the massive station that orbited a neutron star. Kate and her team stepped off the ship wearing formal diplomatic attire, representing Earth's nations and cultures. The reception was different from what they had expected. Instead of hostility or fear, they were met with curiosity and respect. Young aliens asked for autographs from the humans who had fought in the war. Scientists requested interviews. Military commanders wanted to discuss tactics. "It's strange," Kate said to Jake Morrison, who had come along as military liaison. "6 months ago, no one in the galaxy knew we existed. Now they treat us like celebrities." "We're the underdog who won," Jake replied. "Everyone loves that story. Plus, I think a lot of species are relieved to see that the Council's big military powers can be challenged. It makes the galaxy feel a little less dominated by the strong." The formal acceptance ceremony was held in the main council chamber. Kate stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of alien species, and felt the weight of history on her shoulders. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, "humanity thanks you for this opportunity. We come not as conquerors or victims, but as partners. We have much to learn from you about the galaxy, its wonders and its dangers. In return, we offer our friendship, our knowledge, and our commitment to the principles of peace and mutual respect. We are one species among many, but we are ready to take our place among the stars." High Chancellor Tormac formally recognized Earth as a provisional council member, the chamber filled with the sounds of approval from dozens of different species. History had been made. Ambassador Zeloth watched the ceremony with mixed feelings. He had been wrong about Earth, catastrophically wrong. But he had also learned something valuable. The galaxy was bigger and more surprising than any of them had realized. Classifications and assumptions meant nothing when faced with a species that refused to accept limitations. Later, in his private office, Zeloth recorded a classified report that would be sealed for 50 years. The Kratesh invasion of Earth will be studied for centuries as the greatest military miscalculation in galactic history. The Kratesh assumed that superior technology guaranteed victory. They were wrong. Earth has been classified as a Class II civilization based on recent assessments, with projections indicating they could reach Class I status within a generation. Their military is classified as Class I threat level, despite their technological limitations. Recommendation: full cooperation with Earth, immediate technology sharing agreements, priority integration into galactic defense networks. Under no circumstances should any Council member or allied species consider military action against Earth. They have proven they can defeat conventional forces through tactical innovation and sheer determination. Any future conflict with humanity would be devastating for all parties involved. He paused, then added a personal note. I had the privilege of watching humanity's first steps into the galactic community. They are young, aggressive, and unpredictable. They are also creative, forgiving, and honorable. I believe they will become one of the most important species in the galaxy. History will remember the Kratesh invasion not as a tragedy, but as the moment humanity announced itself to the universe. I only hope we are wise enough to welcome them properly. On Earth, General Lisa Brennan stood on a balcony in the new Planetary Defense Headquarters, looking up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, Kate and her team were representing humanity to the galaxy. Soon, human ships would explore distant stars. Human scientists would work alongside alien colleagues. Human children would grow up knowing they were part of something bigger than one small planet. "We did it," Jake Morrison said, joining her on the balcony. "We're really part of the galactic community now." "We did," Lisa agreed. "Though I suspect our real challenges are just beginning. The galaxy is vast, and we've only met a tiny fraction of the species out there. Some will be friends. Some might become enemies. But at least now, we're ready. Because we fought off the Kratesh. Because we learned that being human means more than just surviving. It means adapting, growing, and never accepting that something is impossible. The Kratesh came here expecting to find victims. They found warriors instead. But more than that, they found a species that knows how to fight when necessary and how to forgive when the fighting is done. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us worthy of being part of the galactic community." Far above Earth, in the blackness of space, human ships now patrolled alongside vessels from a dozen different species. The war was over. The invasion had been defeated, and humanity had taken its first real steps among the stars, not as victims or conquerors, but as equals who had earned their place through courage, sacrifice, and an unwillingness to ever surrender. The galaxy had asked, "Who are these humans?" The answer had been written in fire and blood across the void. They are survivors, warriors, and explorers. They are humanity, and the universe would never be quite the same again.